All right, so who was Samson? Samson was a demigod in the original narrative, in the original tradition, before the biblical author took it for its own purposes. So, in the original tradition, Samson was the son of a sun god, much like Hercules was the son of a god. So, and we can see this in the wording. There's wording and symbolism left over from the original tradition in the Bible. So you have a lot of like the hair, a lot of the sun gods in ancient Near East, where had the like the locks of hair were symbolic of the rays of the sun. Delilah is related to the moon goddess. And just overall, there's a lot of astrological symbolism and wording in the story of Samson. You know, you have the lion story, which is the Leo constellation, and the Virgin story for the Virgin constellation. And so all these different astrological references are in the story of Samson. Now, the biblical author was trying to get away from that original tradition, right? The Israelites didn't worship that sun god. So the writer had to repurpose Samson for his own political propaganda. So, you know, the tradition was already out there, so he had to keep some of the story, some of the wording. But it was they would just spin it in a different direction, so that had more to do with the God of Israel. And one other thing that I'll note is that the original tradition seems to have Samson was a homosexual. And so we can see this in the wording as well. There's some sexual euphemisms that are still in the text. Now, the biblical author, not just in Samson, but in other stories as well, will take the sexual euphemisms that are in the original narrative, and then it'll make it a literal, something literal instead of a euphemism. So, like with Samson, grinding the seed was a sexual euphemism, and the biblical author just has Samson literally grinding seed. So changing the story in ways that fits the purposes of the biblical author, but we can still see the remnants from the original narrative. In terms of the homosexual thing, it's it's always playing up Samson as just loving women and almost kind of overboard. To try to get away from that original narrative that had Samson as a homosexual. So, if you want to know more about that, I'll put a link to my podcast episode on Samson. You can check that out. So I use a technique called mirror reading, which helps me reconstruct the original narratives that the biblical authors were using. So, check that out.